Good evening, Scott here, known as Cantaloupe to some online, and I'm bringing a video to you on a subject that's interesting to me. It might be of interest to you or someone you know, and I want to talk about knighthood. That is, people being knighted for bravery and valor and courage and chastity. And this last point, chastity, that is being chaste, C-H-A-S-T-E, is very interesting to me because there's some misconception. I like to disambiguate things when I can because there are a lot of common misconceptions where people are not clear about things or they have the wrong idea entirely. And this is one of those things. So let me talk about what it takes to become a knight. Now, I'm not a knight, but I know a little bit about it. And I've recently heard something about how a prerequisite to becoming a knight is to be chaste. That is to, well, that's the question. What exactly? So if you ask certain people, being chaste as demonstrating chastity is about being celibate. But if you ask me, that's an extreme. And in terms of history, in terms of the whole spectrum of sexual activity that one could partake in, especially if he's a man and a prospective knight, being chaste doesn't mean being celibate necessarily. It could also be anywhere in a wide range of behaviors and attitudes and practices, somewhere between being lecherous, which would obviously disqualify you, and being celibate at the other end. So there's an area, like I said. So I don't believe that chastity is necessarily the same as being celibate, is the point I'm making here, as a prerequisite for knighthood, especially. So what is lechery? To define lechery, it's, romping and stomping all over the countryside, having relations with every maiden you see without scruples or meaningful, principles whatsoever. There can be male sluts, so to speak, where they just have no, desire for a long-term relationship, no bigger picture goals in mind. They just want to get down, and sometimes drugs or alcohol are involved. So the opposite of that would be chastity, where you have principles. You have perhaps a single person or, a very small group of people who you choose to be intimate with, not just random people, not just everybody you see. So there's a big range of behaviors that fall into the spectrum of sexual behavior. And I think it's not fair to assume that chastity and total abstinence are the exact same thing. Although you've heard of chastity belts. Chastity belts, it's kind of a brutal, cruel thing that was imposed on females mostly, I believe. I have never heard of a male being subjected to a chastity belt, but I guess it could have happened at some point. Chastity belts were historically used to preserve the purity of a young woman so that she was not tempted unduly to give in to sexual desires before she was married, because it could actually, back in the day, it could ruin a big deal between royalty, between countries. In fact, when offspring were traded or arranged to be married, and it sounds draconian, it sounds cruel, and many times I'm sure it was, but there are a lot of people, especially including those who have been in arranged marriages, who testify to this. They stand by it. They say, well, we get along just fine. We've learned to love each other, and we wouldn't have it any other way, and we would, do the same thing for our own kids. We would, present an alimony and all, or not alimony, but there's another word, dowry, excuse me. Not alimony is when you split up. A dowry is the gift of offering to become married originally, historically speaking. It's not always required, obviously. Anyway, chastity belts and the idea of being chaste, and practicing abstinence until marriage used to be very strictly enforced, especially among high society Christian cultures, where it was assumed that if a woman were deflowered, if she were sullied, if her reputation was in question, if she had been sampled by anyone but her prospective groom to whom she was being offered, then her value would be destroyed. Now, my own perspective on this, for what it's worth, and this is my opinion, virginity does not stand for much at all, unless it becomes damaging to the girl. Okay, now there's, again, a big range between losing your virginity and becoming twisted and dominated and indoctrinated into, a veritable den of iniquity, which can also happen. Sometimes, unfortunately, young people get pulled very strongly into orgy environments where there's group sex, and their inhibitions are targeted for removal, and they become what's called groomed or conditioned to have a weaker bonding ability with people for the purpose of being exploited sexually. It's a very sad thing, if you ask me. And this is an actual, one of the impulses behind the whole chastity movement. You've heard of purity rings, perhaps, that these are still used, and a lot of people stand by them in principle. I actually think that purity rings are not a terrible idea, but I also think that it should be up to the person. Ultimately, when you're forcing people to behave in ways that you believe in, you're taking the one thing that God has given them away, and that is their agency. The biggest gift God has given people, if you ask me, is our ability to own our own consequences by way of choosing for ourselves what course of action to take. Not just when we're adults, but every step in life. You make a choice, you make a schedule, and within your own sphere, you execute your own decisions, and then you own those consequences, large or small, good or bad. And this is God's gift, to own things, because otherwise they would all belong to someone else, either your boss or a demon or God himself, somebody besides you. Ownership is a beautiful thing. That's how we learn. That's how we actually find joy, if you ask me. The biggest thing that you can own in life is the choice itself, if that makes sense. Last thing I'll say about chastity. It's a big subject. Purity. I think that there is a time and place for many things, most things, if not all things. And when it comes to finally maturing into a happy sexually developed person, as a woman or a man, there's no need to rush it. I think that it is almost always rushed in some way, for selfish personal reasons, by other people who might be attracted to a person who is near that time, hopefully not too far away from it, but there's no need to rush childhood. There's this sentiment, this attitude that it's a race, that if you don't get there first, someone else will. If you don't score first, if you don't get that notch on your bedpost, then you lost. You lost the sport of having sex with that person. But this all misses the point, that there's supposed to be a bigger picture if you're doing it right. There's supposed to be an act of giving, not taking, if you're loving the person, because that's what love is. Love is setting them up for happiness. Love is deriving pleasure second to their pleasure. If you ask me, nobody asked me, but that's how I feel. My kink is her happiness every single time. And if I can't see a smile on her face at least once a day, I have a bigger problem in my life. So I make it my priority. Anyhow, I like to wait until it's not awkward, until it's desired by everybody, and even right in the middle, it can be turned around, and that's okay too. It doesn't always have to happen, doesn't have to happen ever, and when it does, if you wait and you do it right, it's so much better. If you love the person, it's just so much better. Reach out if you like with questions or comments to whitehotrobot@gmail.com. Thank you.